Once you understand what really happens at 55, many of you will realize that you've already earned the right to stop working full-time without blowing up your retirement. If you're between 47 and 62 and still planning to work until 65, this video may change that plan forever. Okay, so here's something that most people, they just don't get. The years between 55 and 65, they're not neutral. They're not just some waiting room between your career and your real life. Here's the thing, for most people, those are actually the highest energy, lowest obligation years that they've got left. Like, your body still works, your kids are probably growing, and right now, millions of people are spending those years at a desk doing a job that's slowly eating them alive. And it's not because they have to, it's just because, well, that's what they've always done, you know? I think about this guy I know, Gene. He's a sharp guy, disciplined, the type who did everything right. Maxed his 401k until his late 30s, paid off the house at 54. His kids were grown and settled. His wife should have retired. And at 55, honestly, by any measure, Gene was ready to retire. But he kept going anyway. 5 more years, he told himself, just to be safe. At 57, he and his wife were supposed to hike the Camino de Frances, that trail that goes across Spain. They talked about it for years. But that spring, a work deadline came up that he just couldn't move. So the trip got pushed off. Next year, he said, and that kind of became his thing to say. At 60, his right knee started acting up. Nothing crazy, just the normal stuff that happens when you're not young anymore. And the Camino, well, that quietly slid from next year to, well, maybe someday. By 62, when Gene finally did retire, he was healthy enough, but not the same that he had been at 55. I mean, he was fine, he just wasn't quite himself anymore. I remember he told me once, not long after he stopped working, he said, I kept thinking that I was being responsible, but I was just scared. And that's the trade that you don't see happening while it's happening. You're not just trading time for money, you're trading a version of yourself, your most capable, most energetic, most available self, for a number and an account that honestly was already big enough. And the cruel part is that you didn't notice the trade happening. You just look up one day and the window's a lot smaller than it used to be. And here's something else that sounds harsh, but I actually think that it's one of the most freeing ideas in this whole conversation. A paycheck is the least flexible income that you'll ever have. Think about that for a minute. When you're employed, your money shows up on a schedule that you didn't pick, taxed at a rate that you don't control, in an amount that's decided by other people. You have basically no say in when it comes or how it's treated by the IRS. It just arrives every 2 weeks, like clockwork. And I get it. That reliability, it starts to feel like safety. But for a lot of you, it's not really safety. It's familiarity. And those two are not the same. See, in retirement, something flips. Suddenly, you get to choose where your income comes from. You can pull from a Roth and pay 0 tax on it. Pull from a brokerage account, only get taxed on the gains, usually at a lower rate. You can time your withdrawals for years where your income's lower, so you're not stuck paying whatever bracket that your old employer basically dumped you into. A lot of people who make this switch describe this one moment, sometimes a couple months into retirement, sitting with their accountant and realizing that their tax rate actually dropped. Not because they earned less, not because they did anything extraordinary, just because for once, they had control over the shape of their own income. Gene, well, he never got that moment. He spent 5 extra years thinking that the paycheck was protecting him. What it was actually doing was making decisions for him. When he worked, what he kept, what he could plan for. And that psychological pull of a steady paycheck is real, so I'm not knocking it. But at some point, it stops being a safety net and starts being an excuse to stay. And those are two very different things. But real quick, if you're finding this helpful and you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe right now. This channel is built for people navigating exactly these kinds of decisions, and there's a lot more coming. So why do people hold on to it so tight? Why does retiring feel riskier even when, well, the math says that you have enough? Honestly, I think it's because that uncertainty just feels dangerous, even when flexibility is on your side. We're wired to like the devil that we know. And a paycheck's been the one financial relationship that most people had their whole adult life. Walking away from it doesn't feel like a money decision. It feels more like an identity thing, which gets me thinking about something else. Past a certain point, working longer doesn't actually lower your risk. It just kind of moves it around. You're not getting rid of risk by staying longer. You're just trading one kind for another. I mean, sure, the risk of running out of money shrinks, but the risk of running out of years that still feel like yours, that one grows every single year that you wait. Gene's portfolio, the year he finally retired, was bigger than he needed it to be. And I'm not talking by a little, I'm talking comfortably bigger. Gene told me that when his financial planner walked him through the numbers, there was this quiet second where Gene just looked at the screen and went, "So I could have left at 58? His planner nodded and said, "Probably 56. And Gene didn't say anything after that. But I remember telling me about that moment, and I remember what his face did when he said it. See, those extra years, they weren't wasted money-wise. I mean, of course, his portfolio grew, the math worked out fine. But his best travel years were behind him by then. His knee wasn't getting any better. And his wife had spent 3 years building a whole retirement life without him because he just wasn't ready yet. We're talking about routines, friendships, little rhythms that were hers because Gene wasn't around to share them. And let me tell you, those years, they don't come back. See, that's what happens when you keep working past the point that you actually need to. It's not really a money loss. It's an experience loss. Conversations that you weren't there for, mornings that you gave to a commute instead of keeping for yourself. That version of retirement that you kept promising yourself, slow, present, actually yours, that kept getting pushed further out until finally it showed up a little smaller than what you pictured. There's this phrase that I keep coming back to, "I'll do it when I retire." You, like most people, probably have a whole list of stuff filed under that. And every extra year of work that you don't need is a year that that list gets longer, while the energy to actually do any of those slowly runs out. Look, the risk of outliving your money, that's definitely real, so I'm not dismissing it. But if you're someone who's saved right, done the work, built a plan, the other side of that scale deserves just as much attention. The risk of living smaller than you earned. The risk of finally getting the freedom that you wanted and realizing that it showed up 10 years later than it should have. So ask yourself, what would it actually take for you to feel ready? And this is where a lot of people have been fed the wrong answer for a long time. The retirement industries spent decades telling you to chase a number. Save 25 times your yearly expenses. Follow the 4% rule. Hit $1 million, then 2. Then whatever the goalpost turned into the last time you checked. And look, that framework, it's not wrong exactly, but it's created a whole generation of people who are financially ready for retirement, but mentally convinced that they're not, because the number never quite feels reached. The 4% rule was meant to be a benchmark, not a finish line, but it started acting like one. And since benchmarks can always be tweaked, there's always another market dip, always another what if, another year of growth that might help. I mean, people just keep moving the target. And not because they really need to, but because anxiety attached itself to a number and started calling itself being careful. Here's what I want you to understand. What actually builds confidence isn't a bigger portfolio. It's a clearer plan. Specifically, knowing where your income's coming from in year 1, year 5, and year 15. Knowing how you'll pull your money out to keep taxes low. Knowing how you'll handle healthcare before Medicare kicks in at 65. Which, by the way, is one of the biggest reasons that people delay retiring longer than they need to. usually because they've overestimated the cost or they just don't know their options. When you actually sit down and map this out, not some rough guess, but the actual real picture, spending, taxes, income sources, something shifts. The anxiety doesn't vanish, but it changes shape. It goes from this big bottomless worry to something specific that you can actually solve. And specific problems you can fix. Vague anxiety, that thing just feeds on itself. Gene, well, he never built that map. He had a number, or a really good one, but not a plan. So once he hit the number, there was nothing to replace the worry with. Just a bigger number to chase. Just one more year. And here's maybe the most important part in all this. The part that Gene figured out too late. And honestly, it's the thing that I think most of when I think about him. Retirement isn't something that happens after work ends. It's a life that you either build on purpose or you just inherit by default. The people who struggle most in retirement, and this shows up over and over again in the research and in every honest conversation that I've had with actual retirees, it usually aren't the ones who run out of money. They're the ones who run out of structure. They walked away from a career that gave them identity, routine, people, a reason to get up, and replaced it with nothing but free time. And it turns out that freedom, without any shape to it, doesn't feel like relief. For a lot of people, that void becomes filled with fear and anxiety. Gene retired. It was in the first year. He felt invisible. Not sad exactly, just kind of, untethered. He'd been a senior engineer for 30 years. People needed his opinion. Meetings got scheduled around him. He mattered in a real obvious way. And then, all of a sudden, he didn't. His phone stopped ringing, emails dried up, and the quiet was louder than he expected it to be. He told me, I spent so much time focusing on my numbers, I guess I just didn't plan for what I would do with all my free time. And that's really the heart of it. Being financially ready, as important as that is, that's just the foundation. What you build on top of it is the actual question. Not just travel or hobbies, though sure, those matter, but the routine of your actual days. Who you spend your time with, who you're trying to become once your time is finally fully your own. The people who do well in retirement all share one thing more than anything else. They retired towards something, not just away from work. They had some rough shape to the next chapter before they even left. Not a rigid plan, but just like a direction, a pull, not just a push. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have everything figured out before you walk out the door. But it does mean asking, what am I actually building here before you retire? Because the people who skip that question usually end up asking it in like year 2, once the whole newness wears off and there's still no structure underneath. Gene, by the way, he's okay now. He found his footing eventually. He turned woodworking into something that really fills him up. He and his wife found their rhythm again. So thankfully, he's content. But if you ask him straight up, he'll tell you, the Spain trip is still sitting on the list. His knees aren't getting any better. And there's a few years in there, 56, 57, 58, that he thinks about sometimes. Not bitter about it, just that quiet feeling of realizing that a door is open a long time before he ever walked through it. My friends, the question isn't really whether you can afford to stop working. For a lot of you, you already can. The real question is whether you figured out what you're building on the other side, and whether you'll decide that before the window closes or after. So let me leave you with this. If you're somewhere between 47 and 62, and you've done the responsible thing, you've saved, you've planned, you've put in the work, there's a real chance the question that you actually need to be asking isn't, how much more do I need? It's, what am I waiting for? And do I even really know? Because honestly, for a lot of you, the waiting isn't about money anymore. It's about not having a clear enough picture of what's next. It's about an identity that's been wrapped up in a career for 30 years and doesn't quite know what it looks like without one. It's about a paycheck that feels like safety, even when the math's telling you otherwise. Those are the real things, and they deserve answers, not just more years at a desk or some job that you no longer enjoy. Gene would tell you the same. And Gene's one of the lucky ones, honestly. I mean, he got out while he still had good years left. He just got out later than he needed to. You don't have to make the same mistake. If this video got you thinking differently about where you're at or where you're headed, the next step, it's not complicated. It's just honest. Sit down with someone who can actually map out your specific picture. Your income sources, taxes, healthcare bridge, withdrawal strategy. Not to find a bigger number, just to find out if you already have enough of a plan to retire now. I mean, who knows? You might actually be really surprised by what you find. The door might already be open. The only question is whether you walk through it or keep walking past it, one more year at a time, until one day you look back and realize that the view from the other side was waiting on you a long time ago. If this video was helpful, please do two things. First, hit that subscribe button, because this channel exists specifically for people like you who are working through the financial and psychological side of retirement. And give it a thumbs up so YouTube puts it in front of somebody else who needs to hear it. And listen, if you enjoyed this video, I made another video that I think you'll like even more. It's called My Real Advice to People Still Working After 60. It's time to retire. I'll leave a link down below. Go watch it, seriously. And remember, retirement isn't just a math problem. Thanks for watching, my friends. I'll see you in the next one.